There's a report out of the Times of London that Donald Trump is going to issue an executive order at the beginning of his presidency doing away with transgender individuals in the military. Our friend Ed Morrissey over at Hot Air has written it up. Trump readying EO to discharge all transgender troops. So says the Times of London. No one should be surprised to hear it. Donald Trump disqualified transgender recruits during his presidency and then campaigned on the issue of runaway wokeness in the Department of Defense. Trump also nominated Pete Hegseth as defense secretary after Hegseth wrote a book laying out how to boost recruitment with a more muscular focus on the actual military mission. Here's what the Times reports. Donald Trump is planning an executive order that would lead to the removal of all transgender members of the U.S. military, defense sources say. The order would come on the first day back in the White House, January 20th. There are believed to be 15,000 active service personnel who were transgender. They would be medically discharged, which would determine that they were unfit to serve. It would also lead to a ban on trans people joining the military and would come at a time when almost all branches of the American Armed Forces are failing to meet recruitment targets. And well, don't we think that one might have something to do with the other? I think it might. Listen, this story floated out there and leaked maybe strategically to an overseas journalistic endeavor, the Times of London, tells me that this is kind of a trial balloon. This is one of those things that they put out there just to see what the reaction might be. Here's the weird time that we're living in, guys. We're the 25th day of November. My daughter's birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Quinn. November 25th, Thanksgiving week. And as of Friday, every major position in the Trump cabinet has been filled. This is extraordinary. He's moved at lightning speed. In less than 3 weeks, he has filled every major position. Usually this is the kind of thing that drags out into the holidays, maybe even into January in some cases. I think that's what it was like 8 years ago with Trump's first term. So what's going to happen now? See, the names are all out there. The confirmation hearings don't start until the new Senate is in place, which is the first week of January. So, yes, there's going to be stories about these nominees and maybe some questions and maybe some scandals about their past. Who knows? But beyond who's going to fill what job, what more does the transition team have to do other than slowly and deliberately get the American people ready for what change looks like? And you want to get out in front of some of the things that might get the worst press, the worst reaction, and the biggest pushback. And this might be one of those things. So maybe Trump is throwing it out there just to see what the response is. And of course, the immediate response is this is not fair to these individuals. They're serving their country. They've met all the standards. Why rip them out? Why, if they haven't done anything that is in some way a violation, or if they can't, if they haven't not met the standard physically, if they're able to serve, why not let them serve? That'll be the question laid out there. And it's a fair question, if I may say. The only answer is, number one, because by keeping them in the military, it in some way degenerates the ability of the military to do their primary job, which is to recruit the best possible fighting force to go and kill our enemy and destroy our enemy. That's the only answer. That in some way their inclusion in the forces, in the armed forces, is degenerating the overall armed forces' ability to do their job. That's the first answer to the question. The second answer is, well, let's be consistent here, because there have been some pretty kick-ass members of our military, like Navy SEALs and Rangers, and from top to bottom, some fierce warriors that have been medically discharged over the last couple of years because they didn't want to get a shot. So if you're going to medically discharge tens of thousands of America's finest warriors because they were in peak physical condition, but they didn't want to get an untested shot for a virus, if that was fair, then maybe it's fair to evaluate some other medical discharges. Let's not forget this moment on the campaign trail when a Green Beret talked to Donald Trump about that very issue.
Good evening, Mr. President. I'm John Frankman. I was a Special Forces Green Beret who was forced out of the military because of the COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
Stuff, right? That's good. That's good.
So the Biden-Harris DoD COVID-19 vaccine mandate was very damaging to the military. It forced thousands of service members out, and thousands do not want to join now. The Biden-Harris DoD has the lowest recruiting in modern history, and now they're pushing more woke training. So how do you plan to repair the military from the damage that was done and hold military leaders accountable?
So I want to have them come back into the military with pay. And, you know, they've been talking about that, but it never happened. They never did what they said they were going to do. There should have never been a mandate. That should have never happened. You should have been given choice, as we say. We want choice in education, and we want a choice there too. And that should have never happened. And, you know, we've lost some of our best people in the military too. Did you leave? Did you leave? Did you ever take the vaccine or anything?
I never did, sir.
So you want a choice, yeah. And do you want it? Would you go back in if they were able to?
As long as there's accountability, potentially.
Yeah, no, there would be accountability, is right. They will fire their asses, but they would, we don't want to lose this guy. We want to get. He's central casting. We want to get him back in. Yeah, we're going to take care of it. I hope you do come back, or I hope you do very well outside. To be honest, wherever you are, I just want you to do well. But we're going to get a lot of people coming back. They should have never had the mandate. The mandate was a big mistake, and they treated people terribly, terribly. Okay? Thank you very much. Great. You look great.
The idea that that man doesn't like the military has always been the biggest joke of a lie that they've ever said about Donald Trump, but I digress. Yeah, so you're going to hear a lot of media pushback. You're going to hear people screaming from the mountaintops how it's unfair, it's unconstitutional, it's discriminatory. You can't discharge all of these people for medical discharge who are identify as transgender because it's not fair to them as individuals. And none of them were saying a damn thing when they discharged men like that, a Green Beret, elite special forces dude, when he was discharged because he wouldn't get the shot. The Navy SEALs fought this thing all the way to the Supreme Court. Certain Navy SEALs, I should say, who refused to get the shot. They weren't screaming about that. They weren't saying that wasn't fair. Which brings us to Pete Hegseth. It was mentioned that Pete Hegseth has been named as Secretary of Defense specifically to address issues like this, not just discharging people who are transgender, but the overall concerns that many people have with our military with regard to the recruitment numbers and with regard to the focus our military has right now and how it's been diverted from what their primary focus should be to things that are of much more of a social justice issues, woke issues, if that's the word you want to use, but social engineering rather than just focusing on the very best military we can get.
And that's why I think it's our only way out is, and that's why I do think we're at an existential moment. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here when it comes to the DoD. I think we're at a shit or get off the pot moment.
Yeah.
We are at a tipping point for total institutional corruption. And Trump has a chance to reverse that should he, when he wins. Because what the military did, I didn't finish the thought on that, is they committed a Bud Light. Like in search of a non-traditional constituency, they offended their core constituency. So there aren't enough lesbians in San Francisco to man the 82nd Airborne.
Mm-hmm.
And in trying to cater to that, they lost the boys from Tennessee and Kentucky and Oklahoma. The traditional dudes who did it because they loved their country, or they wanted the adventure, or they, wanted to try tough things, or they need an up and out of their community, whatever it is. They're like, if I wanted to do the woke crap, I could go to the local community college. Being transgendered in the military causes complications and differences. And the book kind of lays out the common arguments that those on the left or others make, which are baked in social justice. So it started, you saw it under Clinton with the tinkering of Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the reasons for those changes. And I talked to some of the people involved in when that was changed. But it really started to accelerate under Obama. And you saw the trans stuff come at the end of the Obama administration. You saw the women in combat come at the end of the Obama administration. It's because they looked around at the bureaucracies that they controlled in Washington, and the one that was that they didn't control. Obama spent a disproportionate amount of time focusing on the Pentagon. They were skeptical of leadership and eventually brought in political appointees and generals who would do their bidding the way they wanted, which, as you know, in a top-down organization, changes the ethos of the whole thing. So the book is meant to pull the whole curtain back, mostly from Obama forward, and explain how the Army that I enlisted in, or that I swore an oath in 2001 and was commissioned in 2003, looks a lot different than the Army of today, because we're focused on a lot of the wrong things.
All right. And,
And that-
that seems to be the entirety of his argument. And that has to do with it. This isn't about they're saying 15,000. I don't know how many there are, but it's not about those individuals, which, again, by the way, that's a perfect tell in terms of the arguments on behalf of not discharging or trying to, protect the gender dysphoria policies that the Defense Department has already adopted here. The fact is, their focus is to protect and look out for those individuals, which is the opposite of people in the military are supposed to be focusing on. It's not about the individual; it's about what's best for the Corps. It's what's best for the unit, what's best for the entire armed services. And the question is, by catering to these policies, has the inclusion and emphasis on those individuals actually been a broader detriment, and has it deteriorated the overall recruitment of the individuals you really are trying to spend most of your time and energy on for recruiting purposes so that they can come in and fight your battles? He made a perfect point. If I wanted to spend my time on all this woke political stuff and social engineering stuff, I'll go to community college. But I'm choosing to be a Marine because I want to be a Marine. And now you're dragging the Marines down with all this other stuff. And by the way, you'll also hear an argument that, oh, this is the same argument people made about allowing blacks into the military or about women in the military and everything. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true at all. There may have been a handful of people making that argument, but the fact of the matter is the military adopted very quickly to include African Americans into the ranks. The bottom line is, when you're in the military, if the person next to you is competent and they can do their job, great. If not, you got to get out of the way. And the fact is, physically, there are some certain problems. If you are a woman identifying as a man and you want to be a Marine, you're going to have a tough time fighting as a man. It's just the reality of the situation. And if you can't be deployed with your unit, then you're no longer viable. And you have to think of the larger context here. And more importantly, what Mr. Hegseth is articulating here is the constant emphasis and platforming, almost holding up for public adoration those members of the gay, lesbian, and transgender community as somehow being representative of what the military is all about. Well, first of all, not only does that diminish the reality where the vast majority of our fighting forces are not necessarily identified by those categories, but secondly, it actually might be a deteriorating effect on people who want to join the military. Let me give you an example. This is a flashback video that Libs of TikTok put out. This is a lieutenant general in the Air Force, Space Force, excuse me, similar uniforms, talking about Florida's law that was maligned as don't say gay laws, which of course it was never a don't say gay law. But she was speaking out about those new laws and how it was going to affect whether she deployed individuals from Space Force to Florida or not. Take a listen.
Since January of this year, more than 400 anti-LGBTQ plus laws have been introduced at the state level. That number is rising and demonstrates a trend that could be dangerous for service members, their families, and the readiness of the force as a whole. When I look at potential candidates, say for squadron command, I strive to match the right person to the right job. I consider their job performance and relevant experience first. However, I also look at their personal circumstances, and their family is also an important factor. It's a good match for a job does not feel safe being themselves and performing at their highest potential at a given location, or if their family could be denied critical health care due to the laws in that state. I am compelled to consider a different candidate and perhaps less qualified. Those barriers are a threat to our readiness, and they have a direct correlation to the resiliency and well-being of our most important operational advantage.
All right. So that, with all due respect, Lieutenant General, is exactly the problem. That is exactly the problem, that this is a Lieutenant General who is now coming out and speaking out about laws in states, saying that, well, those state laws are going to keep me from being able to deploy individuals to do the jobs, and I won't put them in those states because of what she considers to be putting them in an unsafe situation because of laws that she characterizes as anti-LGBTQ. That's the problem. That's a perfect example of what the problem is. And it's also a perfect example of what the face of our military has been for the last several years, that this is what they're talking about. You know, it's funny. Bud Light does, you know, one TikTok ad with Dylan Mulvaney, and the entire brand is tarnished at this point, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I have Bud Light. I keep a refrigerator in my house. I have 2 refrigerators. My downstairs refrigerator is just full of beer and seltzers and drinks for when I have a bunch of people over to watch football, and we keep it stocked all the time. And there is Bud. It's got to be so skunky now. I should just throw it out. But we've had Bud Light in there for like 3 years. And whenever I get back, I mean, all the other beers I've rotated, I've had to replace, right? But my Bud Light is still there. It's still sitting in the door because people don't want to have it. People don't want to touch it. People don't want to drink it. It's become a joke. When I was in Las Vegas 2 weekends ago, we were at a sports book. My 3 brothers and I were watching football. It's full of guys watching football, betting on football. And I don't know about you, when you're at Vegas, they bring by these girls that have buckets of beer that come by and they're selling. It's like, I don't want to buy a beer from you, but they're, you know, dressed pretty and they want to say. And so she comes by with this bucket of Bud Light. And we're like, nah, no, thank you. No, thank you. And she says, no, it's free. It's free. They were giving away Bud Light for free at the sports book in Vegas. And they had to hire a girl, a pretty girl, you know, dressed like a Vegas showgirl, giving away free Bud Light because it was the only way they could get Bud Light out there in people's hands. And my brothers and I looked at each other and we're like, no, thanks. I don't even want your free Bud Light. My point is, Bud Light has so ruined their image, ruined their brand because of the Dylan Mulvaney thing. And now people don't want Bud Light. They don't have anything to do with Bud Light. Imagine the reputation of the United States military right now if they continue to press these issues and make it the focal point of what they do and who they are, instead of focusing on the excellence and brilliance of the people who are in the military and the great work that they do every day. If you really do care about the military, you'll be focused on this issue. And however the Trump administration deals with it, it's going to be very important to how we fight our future wars.